General Hospital. Ronnie's shocking truth brings unexpected peace to the Quartermain family. In a stunning turn of events on ABC's General Hospital, the Quartermain mansion drama reaches an emotional crescendo as Ronnie grapples with the revelation that will forever change her relationship with her family. What began as a typical inheritance dispute has blossomed into something far more meaningful, a moment of genuine reconciliation and family unity that longtime viewers never saw coming. The drama started when it became clear that Monica's will held secrets nobody anticipated. For weeks, tension simmered beneath the surface of the Quartermain household as family members wondered who would inherit their matriarch's substantial assets. However, the answer came in the most unexpected way possible, through Outback, the family dog, who played an unlikely role in uncovering the truth that would reshape everything. Tracy, the formidable Quartermain matriarch, discovered the real will with Outback's assistance, a detail so serendipitous it could only happen in a soap opera. The document clearly stated that Tracy, not Ronnie, was the rightful heir to Monica's estate. For most people, such news would trigger heartbreak, resentment, or a bitter legal battle. But Ronnie's response has shocked everyone in Port Charles. "I don't care about the money," Ronnie declared simply, her voice steady and genuine. "And I certainly don't want to stay in Port Charles. I never did." These words, so refreshingly honest, immediately reframed the entire narrative. This wasn't about greed or family rivalry. This was about something deeper, about where Ronnie's heart truly lay. A shocking revelation changes everything. As Ronnie began packing her belongings, preparing to leave the mansion and Port Charles behind, she realized that her departure needed to mean something. She couldn't simply slip away without addressing the elephant in the room that had complicated the Quartermain family dynamics for so long: the confusion around the mansion sale. Gathering the family together in the iconic Quartermain living room, Ronnie took a deep breath and unleashed a revelation that would have stunned anyone listening. "I need to tell you all something," she announced, her eyes moving around the room to meet each family member's gaze. "The truth about the mansion and Drew." The room fell silent. Everyone leaned forward, anticipating drama. But what came next was entirely unexpected. "I never wanted to sell the Quartermain mansion to Drew," Ronnie revealed. Her voice wavered slightly with emotion. "And neither did Monica. That was never the plan. The whole idea. I brought it up because I was trying to do something else entirely. I wanted to bring this family back together." The confession hung in the air like a confession in a confessional booth. Years of tension, assumptions, and misunderstandings crystallized in that single moment. "I thought that if I could give us all something to argue about, something to work through together, maybe we could find our way back to each other," Ronnie continued. "This family was falling apart. We were distant, cold, going through the motions. So yes, I created this situation. I pushed for the mansion to go to Drew, knowing it would spark a reaction, knowing it would force us to talk, to fight, to feel something instead of just drifting apart." Joss, one of the younger family members, shook her head in disbelief. "Ronnie, that's actually kind of brilliant and crazy at the same time." "It was a desperate move," Ronnie admitted. "I didn't have a better idea. All I knew was that I couldn't watch this family disintegrate in silence anymore." The catalyst for unexpected reconciliation. This stunning admission seemed to crack something open in everyone's chest. The manipulative scheme, if it could even be called that, was born not from malice, but from love-twisted, convoluted love, but love nonetheless. Ronnie had been willing to be the villain in the family narrative if it meant they would finally reconnect. The most dramatic moment came when Tracy stepped forward. For years, Tracy and Ronnie had maintained a complicated, often hostile relationship. There was history, their old grievances, competing interests, and the general friction that can develop between strong personalities under the same roof. But as Ronnie's motivations became crystal clear, something shifted in Tracy's expression. "I've been so angry with you for so long," Tracy said, her voice measured but warm. "I thought you were trying to destroy this family's legacy, to tear us apart for your own gain. She paused, studying Ronnie's face. But I was wrong. I see it now. What happened next caught everyone off guard. Tracy, the formidable force of nature who had presided over the Quartermain dynasty with an iron fist, stepped forward and embraced Ronnie in a long, genuine hug. It wasn't a quick, perfunctory gesture. It was a real embrace, the kind that says 1,000 unsaid things. "I don't hate you anymore," Tracy whispered, loud enough for the others to hear. "I think I finally understand you." Ronnie, tears streaming down her face, held onto Tracy tightly. "I never wanted you to hate me," she replied softly. "I just wanted us to matter to each other." A new chapter begins. As preparations for Ronnie's departure began in earnest, the mood in the Quartermain mansion shifted palpably. There was sadness, certainly sadness, that Ronnie was leaving, that this chapter of the family story was closing. But there was also relief, understanding, and a sense of closure that had been missing for far too long. The other family members, witnessing the reconciliation between Tracy and Ronnie, began to process their own feelings about the situation. Conversations that should have happened years ago finally took place. Old wounds were acknowledged. New perspectives were shared. The Quartermain family didn't suddenly become a picture-perfect unit, but they became something more authentic, a family that could be honest with each other, even when that honesty was messy and complicated. "You know, I could stay," Ronnie offered one afternoon, as she folded clothes into a suitcase. "Now that everything is out in the open, I could actually be happy here. We could all be happy here." Tracy shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart, I think you need to go. You've always known Port Charles wasn't your place, and that's okay. Family doesn't mean you have to live in the same house or the same town. It means you understand each other. It means you care. And I think we finally do really, truly care about each other." Ronnie nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom in Tracy's words. "So this is goodbye, then. This is a new beginning," Tracy corrected. "For all of us." Reflections on family and letting go. As Ronnie's departure date approached, it became clear that her time in Port Charles had served a purpose far greater than any inheritance ever could. She had forced her family to confront the distance between them. She had chosen vulnerability over comfort, chaos over complacency. In doing so, she had given them a gift of genuine reconciliation. The Quartermain mansion would still belong to Tracy. Drew would not be getting the property. The will would stand as it was written. But something more valuable had been gained: a restored connection, a family that could look each other in the eye and speak the truth. Ronnie, standing in the front hall of the mansion one final time, looked around at the elegant furnishings, the portraits on the walls, the history embedded in every stone. She had never belonged here, not really. But in her final act as part of this household, she had given her family something they desperately needed: the catalyst for change. As she grabbed her last suitcase and headed toward the door, Tracy, the other family members gathered nearby, waved goodbye. There were tears, but they were different tears than anyone expected: tears of hope rather than despair, tears of understanding rather than bitterness. "Where will you go?" someone asked. Ronnie smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "Somewhere that feels like home," she replied. "Finally." And with that, Ronnie closed the door on one chapter and opened the door to another. The Quartermain family, forever changed by her presence and her departure, faced a future that was uncertain but no longer shadowed by resentment and misunderstanding. In Port Charles, where drama is currency and change is constant, this quiet moment of family reconciliation might seem small, but for those who witnessed it, who understood the depth of what had transpired, it was anything but small. It was transformative. It was real. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Next, dangerous alliances. Carlisle's desperate gamble when motherhood collides with betrayal. The tension in Port Charles has reached a boiling point. What began as Carlisle's fierce protection of her daughter Jocelyn has spiraled into a web of deception, betrayal, and dangerous consequences that threaten to destroy everyone she loves. As Jack Brennan's manipulative tactics continue to tighten around her family, Carly finds herself making choices that will alter the course of everyone's lives and ultimately her own freedom. The breaking point. When trust shatters. Carly had always prided herself on knowing her children inside and out. But when Jason Morgan pulled her aside and revealed that Brennan had recruited Jocelyn into the WSB and had been lying about it for months, something inside her snapped. The realization that her daughter had been living a dangerous double life under the guidance of a man she trusted cut deeper than any betrayal in recent memory. How could I not know? Carly demanded, her voice trembling with fury as Jason attempted to explain the situation. Jason's face reflected her pain, knowing that he had been ordered by Brennan to keep silent about Jocelyn's involvement or risk Britt's freedom. The blackmail, the manipulation, the calculated exploitation of her grieving daughter, it was all too much. Jocelyn had joined the WASB following Dex's tragic death, seeking purpose and a way to channel her pain. But Carly saw something far more sinister. Jack Brennan preying on a vulnerable young woman, pulling her into a world of danger and lies. When she learned that Brennan had sent Jocelyn on increasingly dangerous missions, each one supposedly designed to test her loyalty and capability, Carly's maternal instinct transformed into something darker, a cold, calculated rage. An unlikely alliance forms behind prison bars. In a move that shocked even herself, Carly arranged a clandestine visit to Steinmauer Prison in Switzerland. Using a fake identity and Damian Spinelli's technical expertise, she managed to get inside to meet with Valentin Casadini. The man she once would have called an enemy became her unexpected ally in a plot against their common foe. Valentin had been imprisoned largely due to circumstances orchestrated by Brennan. When he saw Carly enter his cell disguised as his attorney, a knowing look crossed his face. Without hesitation, Carly laid out her intention to destroy Jack Brennan and free her daughter from the WSB's grip. "You wantin'?" Carly asked, her voice steady and lethal. Valentin smiled, a cold, calculated expression that spoke volumes. "I've been waiting for someone like you," he replied. "Brennan's leverage over me is running out, but you're the only person in Port Charles he truly cares about. That makes you invaluable." Valentin's theory was chilling. Brennan hadn't simply recruited Jocelyn after Dex's death. The WSB director had orchestrated or, at minimum, failed to prevent Jocelyn's involvement in Cyrus's death, using it as leverage to bind her to the agency forever. It was psychological manipulation on a level Carly had never imagined. "He owns her now," Valentin explained, with a confession that could send her to prison and with ongoing missions that keep pulling her deeper into this world. He'll never let her go. The plot deepens. Revenge turns dangerous. Carly's first move was strategic. She convinced Brennan that Charlotte needed to be protected from the emotional toll of frequent international travel. Using her understanding of Brennan's personality, she persuaded him to transfer Valentin to a prison facility closer to Port Charles, one that would ultimately make it easier for Valentin to escape. But as Carly's scheme unfolded, the stakes escalated far beyond what she had anticipated. She began digging into Brennan's operations, using Spinelli's resources and Valentin's insider knowledge. What she uncovered was damning evidence of manipulation, blackmail, and unauthorized operations that extended far beyond Jocelyn's recruitment. Carly gathered documents, recordings, and witness statements. She was building a case that would not only destroy Brennan's career, but would also expose him to criminal prosecution. She even reached out to individuals on the periphery of his operations, carefully collecting pieces of the puzzle. But then, disaster struck. Arrest, the moment everything falls apart. The exact details of how authorities discovered Carly's involvement vary depending on the source, but the result was inevitable. Carly was arrested. What had begun as a mother's righteous fury to protect her daughter transformed into a criminal conspiracy. Whether she crossed a line by attempting to actually harm Brennan, or whether the evidence she gathered was deemed improperly obtained, The outcome was the same handcuffs, police custody, and the shocking headline that reverberated through Port Charles. Carly arrested in connection with Brennan investigation. The news devastated Jocelyn. Her mother, her protector, the woman who had fought against Brennan's control on her behalf, was now behind bars. Jocelyn found herself spiraling, caught between guilt and a gnawing realization. While her mother was suffering the consequences of trying to rescue her, she remained trapped in the WSB's web. The missions continued. The lies to her family persisted. And now, she was truly alone. Will all of my assignments involve lying to my family? Jocelyn had asked Brennan during a briefing, her voice hollow. The question hung in the air, rhetorical, resigned, and utterly without hope. Michael, Jocelyn's older brother, was devastated by the news of their mother's arrest. Always the dutiful son, he immediately began working behind the scenes to help her. He consulted with lawyers, gathered support, and looked for any legal avenue that might help reduce her sentence or prove her innocence. The impossible choice, Jason's dilemma, as Carly languished in custody awaiting trial. A new and terrifying complication emerged. Brennan, it seemed, had prepared for this possibility all along. Jason Morgan received an ultimatum that would test the very foundations of his loyalty and morality. Word came through an intermediary that Brennan possessed something, or more accurately, someone Jason cared about. The message was unmistakable. Either Jason allowed himself to be injected with a poison that would slowly end his life, or people Jason loved would suffer consequences he couldn't prevent. It was psychological warfare at its finest. Brennan wasn't just playing chess with individuals, he was orchestrating an entire symphony of suffering, calculated to ensure that anyone who stood against him would ultimately have to choose between their own survival and the survival of those they loved. Jason sat alone in a darkened room, processing the impossible choice before him. Inject a lethal substance into his veins and accept his own death, or refuse and watch as Brennan systematically destroyed everyone connected to him. Sonny, his partner and brother in all but blood, wouldn't accept that kind of sacrifice. Neither would Carly, despite her imprisonment. But Brennan knew that Jason was the type of man who had made sacrifices before. He had died before or been thought dead for causes he believed in. Brennan was betting that Jason would do it again. A family torn apart. In the prison, Carly remained remarkably composed on the surface, though anyone who knew her well could see the storm raging behind her eyes. Her lawyer informed her of the complications in her case. The evidence was circumstantial, some of it potentially inadmissible. But the prosecutor was building a narrative that painted her as a woman who had conspired to commit assault, if not worse, against a government operative. Meanwhile, Jocelyn visited her mother when allowed, and the conversations were heartbreaking in their restraint. Carly couldn't tell her daughter about some of the developments for fear of drawing Brennan's attention to additional family members. Instead, she offered what comfort she could, but the message was clear. Carly's sacrifice hadn't freed Jocelyn at all. It had merely changed the nature of her captivity. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Jocelyn whispered through the glass partition during one of their final supervised visits before the trial. "This isn't your fault, sweetheart," Carly replied, her voice firm despite the pain visible in her eyes. "None of this is your fault. You didn't create this situation. Brennan did, and I'll find a way to prove it." But even as she said the words, Carly wasn't certain she believed them. The legal system was a labyrinth, and Brennan had positioned himself well within it, or more accurately, above it. As a WSB operative with resources and connections most law enforcement officials could barely comprehend. Valentin's gambit, the price of an alibi. In the shadows of this unfolding tragedy, Valentin made his move. He offered the authorities information that could exonerate Carly or at least cast serious doubt on the prosecution's case. Valentin had evidence of Brennan's manipulation, recordings of conversations, documentation of unauthorized operations. But Valentin never gave anything away for free. His price was high. He demanded assistance in escaping from custody. Some sources suggested he wanted protection in exchange for his testimony. Others hinted that he was seeking leverage to secure his freedom and a chance to disappear into a new life, far from Port Charles and far from Brennan's reach. "If you want my help," Valentine told the investigators coldly, "you'll need to make a deal, and that deal includes my release." The question became whether prosecutors and law enforcement would accept such a bargain. Was Valentine's testimony worth the political fallout of allowing a convicted criminal to walk free? The answer seemed to depend largely on how badly they wanted to bring down Jack Brennan. The unraveling. As time passed, the situation continued to deteriorate in ways no one could have fully anticipated. Carly remained imprisoned, fighting her legal battles while her family fractured under the weight of her absence. The revelation of her arrest had also exposed some of the darker details of Brennan's operations, and suddenly, other victims began coming forward, people who had been coerced, manipulated, or blackmailed by the WSB director. What had started as one woman's desperate attempt to save her daughter had become a potential indictment of an entire system and the man who weaponized it for personal power. Brennan's authority was being questioned. His methods were under scrutiny, and for a brief moment, it appeared that justice might finally find its way through the tangled web of lies and manipulation he had constructed. But in Port Charles, nothing was ever that simple. And as long as Brennan held leverage over Britt, over Jason, over the city's political structure, the fight remained painfully unresolved, and the cost continued to rise for everyone involved. The truth was this: Carly had sacrificed her freedom to protect her daughter, but Jocelyn remained trapped. Michael was forced into the role of family leader. Jason faced an impossible moral choice, and the city of Port Charles waited, holding its breath, to see what Brennan's next move would be and whether anyone would survive the consequences of standing against him.